on cultural mitigations.
All right. I don't know how many of you have had to deal with doing cultural resource work in conjunction with projects, your business, or anything else. I know we in the BLM have to do this too. There are laws that require anything that is ground disturbing, that involves the federal government, to do cultural resource inventories, and if you find sites, you have to evaluate them to see whether or not they are significant. If they are significant and eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, then there's a whole set of regulations that you need to comply with before you can continue on with your project. And the whole idea of this is to make sure that important archaeological sites, and these are part of everybody's history. We tend to think that because it's mostly the Indian people who were here, you go back 3,500 years in Europe, and just about everybody there was living the way the Indians were living here. So it's in that sense, we're looking at our own history. It's just in a slightly different place. And we can learn from it. Plus, the descendants of these people are still living today here in Wyoming and Colorado and Montana, Idaho, all over the West. And so we're looking at their ancestral heritage, so it's important to them too. And these are our neighbors, our colleagues, our friends. So there's a lot of motivation besides the shaking the finger and waving the stick at you to do this. When you have a site that is eligible for the National Register, you have to look at it and find out if you can avoid it with your project. Can you redesign the project a little bit so you don't damage it? And when you can't do that, which sometimes happens, I'm working on the Chokecherry Sierra Madre wind energy project. And we have 4 sites out there, out of 480 some sites, that we could not avoid with the project. There was particularly a haul road, and there were places where it could not be rerouted. You just couldn't move it. It had to go through a certain area, and there were National Register eligible sites there. So what are you going to do? This project's going to go through and destroy the site. Well, they have what they call mitigation. Mitigation means taking some of the sting out of it. And in this case, it's mitigation by excavation, by data recovery, we call it. And what you go in is, and you excavate, you dig up everything that's there. You recover the artifacts, you recover charcoal for radiocarbon dating, you recover plant remains for pollen analysis, and so on and so on. And basically, on paper, reconstruct what was there. You record all the data. And that's mitigation of the damage to be done to it by data recovery. Okay, let's get real with this. That ain't cheap, and it takes time. It's a pain in the neck most of the time. It delays your project and costs you a whole lot of money and doesn't give you anything in return. Well, maybe not. What I'm going to try and talk to you about here is how to turn that stick that says you have to do this, and it's going to cost you time and money, into a carrot where you can figure out how to get something positive out of that without having to go too much out of your way and do much more than you would normally do to mitigate a site. These are typical things that you'll see on mitigation. Holes dug in the ground. Here's a little hearth with charcoal in it. There's a guy, he found I think it was about a 9,000-year-old projectile point when he was digging in to lay a pad for trash cans. Here's a, we don't know what the heck that was, but it was out in the middle of a project area, and we had to go out and spend a day trying to figure out whether it was something they needed to deal with. Up here, this is a site that was right next to a bicycle trail. Bicycle and horse that was being heavily impacted. We had to decide whether we were going to do data recovery on it and reroute the trail, or whether we were going to turn it into something else. Aha. Up here, this was up on Miller Hill here on the Chokecherry. They're doing shovel testing, seeing how deep the deposits are on one of the sites we're going to have to do data recovery on. And this costs money and takes time. So the idea here is to think outside the box, to go beyond just doing what the law requires of you, what the regulation says you have to do at a minimum. And go beyond that, because what you start getting into is something that allows you to do a number of things that, well, let me backtrack a little bit. One of the things most companies are very aware of is that a positive public image is worth its weight in gold. If when people say your name or hear your name, and they think, oh yeah, they're the ones who do all this good stuff, that's something that's very expensive to get that kind of an image usually. And what I'm going to talk about is the way you can do that on the real cheap while you're in the process of doing something you have to do anyway. This is a site in Arizona that was out along a road. It was being heavily impacted by visitors who knew it was there, but it had not been developed, and it was being damaged, and the Forest Service had to do something about it, because the Forest Service and the BLM, we have to obey these laws too. And if there are adverse effects happening to sites that are within our jurisdiction, we have to do mitigation too. So what they decided to do, they were going to develop this as an interpretive site, one that the public could go out to, spend an hour, spend a day, whatever they wanted, touring the site, visiting it, looking at it up close, just walking through quickly, whatever. But they came up with an idea of how to do it, and they developed this site, which had a beautiful parking lot with 3 picnic ramadas. Those are the ones with the roof over them, and a really nice toilet, and interpretive signs, a trail through the site. Some of the parts of the site were reconstructed partially, and the whole operation cost them $150,000, which is probably what it would have cost them if they had hired a company to just come in and do data recovery. They managed to do it in several ways. One of the main things they did was they got the public involved. They went out and recruited volunteers. They got the Archaeological Society involved, the local chapter. This was up near Carefree and Cave Creek, which is just north of Phoenix. Which, by the way, Phoenix, the graffiti capital of the world, do you see any on these signs? There isn't any. I found one little name scratched with a knife, and that was it after 10 years of this site being out there because of the way they did it. And they involved the public from the very beginning. They had these volunteers come out to help build the trail, to help excavate the various features out there that they needed to excavate. They had volunteers help them rebuild some of the walls. They had volunteers help them work with the wording on the signs, with the design of the signs. And then they left the site alone. There was nobody out there standing there saying, stay on the path, don't pick anything up, put it back, oh, come out. None of that. The signs were worded in such a way, they explained to people that this belongs to you, this is our heritage, and they all very positive, explained site etiquette. You know, the best way to deal with this is you can go out and walk through here and you can pick things up, but please put them back so others can enjoy. And what they did is they developed in people a proprietary outlook on this. People took ownership of this so that you could be out there at any time of day and there would be people showing up. You didn't know. To go out there and try and dig up there, you didn't know when someone was going to show up. And if someone did show up, they'd tell you, hey, cut that out, and probably call the cops. Because it was their site. It belonged to the people who lived there. All the Forest Service had to do was go out once a week, empty the trash, clean out the bathrooms. That was the only maintenance they did on this thing, and it was pristine. I've never seen a better cared for interpretive site. And the fact is, though, that most interpretive sites that are run very loosely have a tendency to be that way. The people who use them feel they own them, and they don't allow them to be vandalized and trashed. So that's a pretty neat thing. And when you're doing that with any sort of site, this was in Australia, where they took a site. This was a rock art site. It's kind of hard to see, but that rock is just covered with paintings. And these were paintings by Aboriginal people whose ancestors first painted it. I think this thing was about 2,000 years old. But the people today still use it. The Aborigines hold ceremonies there every year, and the public is allowed to visit it too. And they've worked out a system, the same thing, where there's nobody out there all the time. You don't have to buy a ticket. You don't have to sign a register. But they do have signs asking you to respect this, respect that, and interpretive signs explaining the nature of the site so you can see why you need to behave that way. Again, no trash, no vandalism, and this was just one of many sites I saw like this. These are the one on this side. This is a historic site in North Carolina that they rebuilt. It was a tower that was built back around the turn of the century that deteriorated and was loved half to death and then rebuilt and then vandalized and rebuilt. And the most recent rebuilding, I hope, will be the last one. And this one is here on our district. This is another historic site, a ranch that has been preserved. But these are all open to the public. And these are all sites that you can go out there anytime, 24/7, and go out with your family, with your friends, whatever. You don't have to pay to get in them. And the people who have made these happen are given credit. And this is the thing I want to emphasize on this. If you've got a company that has to do mitigation, you can start doing this. Not on every site you've got. Some of this stuff is not suitable. You get a lot of sites that you can involve volunteers. You can call the local newspaper and say, hey, we're having a volunteer day where we've got some professional archaeologists who are going to be out there and show people how to excavate and supervise and train. And the paper will send out a reporter and a camera, and they will give you full credit for free. Sometimes you'll get people from the radio station. Well, I was on a volunteer day in Denver where we had somebody from the NPR station in Denver come out and do it was like a 10-minute piece that they did. Really nice. If you do it properly and are in the right market, where you've got a local TV station, you can probably get the TV cameras out there. And you get somebody in their wonderful logo t-shirt, standing there, giving a talk. You get credit for that, and it doesn't cost you a dime. And you get your mitigation done at the same time. The more you can involve volunteers, the less you have to pay us professionals. So this is something that, again, what I'm saying is you can turn that stick into a carrot. You can save money and make money. If you start thinking beyond, outside the envelope, outside the box, get creative with this. Because one of the things about archaeology, history, is that people love it. Almost everybody is interested in it to one degree or another. And the reason for this is it deals with our absolute favorite subject, us. You know, you can't beat that. And when you involve the public, volunteers are the public. Every one of these people in these pictures were volunteers. And if they had a good time, and I'm pretty sure all of them did, nobody said anything that I heard anyway, they all told their friends what a great time they had and gave credit to the people who made it happen for them. You can't buy goodwill like that. Well, you can, but it's very expensive. Word of mouth advertising is just incredible. And every one of those people talked to every one of their friends about the 2 weeks or the week that they spent. Some of this was out at Teton Reservoir, where I've got a project going, which, by the way, starting in June, we're going to have lots of volunteer opportunities if you would like to get out and get involved in some archaeological survey and some digging, some shovel tests. We're going to be doing that probably every Saturday all summer. You just give us a call over at the BLM, and we'll be glad to let you have the opportunity. And this is brought to you by the Rawlins field office. But every one of those people, even if they only have 2 friends, you've gotten that out to 3 people, and those 2 are going to get it out to 2 more, and that just balloons exponentially. And it didn't cost you a dime to do it. So involve volunteers and involve the public that way. Any questions? Sir?
Mike, I'd like to take a moment to put a plug into the Carter County Museum. It's about to build a new museum. And if you had an archaeological site you could put into a display, this would be an ideal time to get together with the director and display put in there with your name on it.
You've got a deal. Silver-tongued devil talked us right into it. Any other questions? Comments? Go All right, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate the turnout.
Was I not doing that the whole time? Was I not doing that the whole time? Yeah, that thing was going.